ESPN, celebrating 150 years of college football.
A college football upset is unlike any other upset in any sport. It is truly David versus Goliath.
If you ask them, would you prefer to be the favorite or the underdog, they say the underdog. And the number one reason, there's nothing to lose.
We're playing for the city of Boise, our university, the state of Idaho, and anybody else out there that thinks they might not have a chance.
43 years and that much.
If you're at Navy and you lose 43 years in a row, you're thinking, why the heck do we still play this game?
Thomas fighting, stopped. The streak has ended.
There is no high like an upset win high. You just go nuts.
Absolutely bedlam on the sideline.
I used to have a saying, about the time your players and coaches think it can't happen, that's when it happens.
Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
The greatest.
Guys, I want to thank all of you for coming here on the anniversary of college football. 150 years, we're celebrating the game that means so much to all of us. I can't think of another sport that encourages as much civil and sometimes not so civil discussion and debate and discourse as college football. I'm hoping most of this will be civil, but if you want to get uncivil every now and then, that might make it fun. So I want you guys to think of us as a jury. And since there are 11 of us, let's come up with top 11 in a number of categories. And what we're going to do is try to put together the greatest of the great in college football. You know, I think however you define the upset, whether it's a rankings, whether it's a perception of programs, those are games that stick with us for a long time. So what do you guys think about the 11 greatest upsets in the history of college football?
Boise State, David slays Goliath. Boise State in an upset over Oklahoma. How do you like that one?
It's a good story.
That's a good story.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, we'll see.
Chris Peterson trying to become the first rookie coach ever to win 13 games. He just wants his team to play their best game. It may not be enough to beat Oklahoma, but he wants them to represent all the little guys.
And Zabransky looking for it all. Wide open in the end zone. Touchdown, Dryzen James.
Oklahoma was really a tough year for them. Adrian Peterson gets hurt about mid-season, breaks a collarbone.
Here's Adrian Peterson, and he is chopped down.
That was Peterson's first game back. The whole thing just coalesced so well, but the biggest one, zero fear from the Boise State kids. They came right out and took it to him.
Steps away from trouble, throws to the far side, and James cuts it back to the inside. Touchdown! Down the middle, James, the lateral! Can you believe that? Boise State for the win. They hand it off to Johnson. Boise State has won the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl.
To lose on a Statue of Liberty play? Are you kidding me? I was depressed for a week.
This one here is for the Bronco Nation right
here. Center College is a small school in Kentucky. Very good academic school. But then they decide they want to build a football program. So they hire a coach, they start recruiting people, and they're like, we're going to play Harvard. We're going to beat Harvard.
Harvard's a national power. They hadn't lost a game in 3 years. They hadn't lost an intersectional game in 40 years. Harvard was unbeatable. Center College comes in, and Bo McMillan was a terrific player. He was their best player on both sides of the ball. Remember, it's one platoon football, and not only does he keep Harvard off the scoreboard, but he has a 32-yard reverse in the third quarter that breaks the game open, and Center gets on the scoreboard and wins the game 6-0.
Center College goes crazy, and it feels like the biggest upset in the history of college football. And then Center College just vanishes. It's the first example of a school that was a complete underdog upending the establishment.
The Army, unbeaten in 32 games, tackles a tough foe at Bakersfield, New York.
Columbia beating Army is one of the greatest upsets of all time, no doubt about it.
Army in 1947 was as big a power as there was in college football outside of South Bend. They had won 30 games dating back to the war when they were all powerful.
Rowan makes it 14-0 for the favorite Cadets.
Columbia wasn't considered to be in the class of Army, that's for sure.
Heaves a pass to the day's outstanding receiver, short-fingered Bill Swiacki. That's good for 30 yards and a first down.
The line opened up big holes for Cusero.
Cusero lugs it over for Columbia.
They just had one of those games where they played over their head.
Jablonski's kick makes it Columbia 21, Army 20. It's all over.
November 27, 1926, Knute Rockne's undefeated Notre Dame juggernaut taking on Carnegie Tech, now known as Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Tech was a 5-1 underdog and pulled off a stunning 19-0 upset. Rockne was so confident in his 8-0 Irish, which had given up just one touchdown all year long, that he went to Chicago to scout the Army-Navy game.
He passed it up because he thought Notre Dame would win so easily. He felt that an assistant could handle Carnegie Tech. While he was sitting in the press box scouting the other game, and he got reports of what was happening at Carnegie Tech, and he almost had a heart attack.
You go into these games, and you take it for granted that all you have to do is show up and win, and you're behind by 19 points with little or no time left to play, and then you wonder what happened.
He couldn't believe what he did. He felt extremely guilty. He felt that that's one thing I never should have done, and I'm never going to do it again.
Brigham Young University has the #1 ranked college football team in the nation. But that doesn't appear to impress everyone who follows football.
There have been some great upsets over the years in the regular season. There's only been one non-big conference team ever to win the national championship, BYU in 1984.
What elevated BYU in that season was their opening game of the year. They went into Pittsburgh and smacked Pittsburgh in the mouth, and that set the tone for what was the BYU season.
Bosco looking, running, gets it off. He's got Smith at the 30, gets by a man. He may score. 20, 10, 5, touchdown, BYU.
I don't think the voters in 1984 paid quite as close attention to strength of schedule than certainly the College Football Playoff Committee does today.
I just have never felt like we had to apologize for our schedule or the people that we've played.
BYU ends up #1 playing in the Holiday Bowl.
BYU trying to win the football game right here. Bosco looking. Scrambles, throws it.
I don't know that it can ever happen again. What happened with BYU in '84, it was just one of these perfect set of circumstances where that team got taken seriously in a way that other teams in their position since then never really have.
Oh boy, Brigham Young University has won the Holiday Bowl 24-17, and the Cougars are the only undefeated team in the nation.
On the subject of upsets, I take issue with the common vernacular of David versus Goliath because David had the Lord on his side, which would make him a heavy, heavy favorite to begin with. But if you're going to go big guy against little guy, those are some of the most memorable upsets.
I like that, Reese. I agree.
When I think, little guy, big guy, Boise State, Oklahoma, that's the game that stands out for me because...
I get that was an upset and we all loved it, but Boise State was not Carnegie Tech. They were a good team.
You're telling me that a Boise State team that doesn't recruit like Oklahoma is supposed to be considered competitive, as good, and whatnot, and a team that does not play that schedule. I can tell you what, the big boys didn't regard that as a game that should have been close. That matchup, you're thinking the only way Oklahoma doesn't win this game is they do a Knute Rockne.
Can I bring up BYU before we get too long? Because in 1984, I lived this experience. As a kid who went to BYU games since I was 5 years old, I have been at every important BYU game in my lifetime. And for a BYU team, a small religious school in the middle of Provo, Utah, to rise up and win a national championship. Robbie Bosco was the quarterback. I may or may not still have a life-size poster of him in my home. I thought that was a conversation before the BCS era that was shocking to the nation. And I know a lot of people think they didn't deserve it. They went undefeated. They did what they had to do.
They didn't play Bama.
Well, they were undefeated.
They beat one ranked
But
team.
you know what
Pittsburgh.
BYU did?
They were an outlier
Right.
that did it. To me, that was the ultimate David versus Goliath versus the whole college football system.
I put Columbia Army first because any victory that Columbia has is automatically at the top of anybody's list in any decade. If Columbia wins, it's number one.
I think anybody can land a big punch, right, and get a big upset win. But there are certain wins and certain victories that become benchmarks, and there are certainly some upsets in the history of college football that have changed the course for seasons and teams.
The Sooners are unbeaten in 47 straight games, and Oklahoma features a scoring streak of 123 consecutive contests. The last team to down OU was Notre Dame, and the Fighting Irish are Oklahoma's opponents today.
Notre Dame football in the late 1950s was not very good, and that's polite.
At Norman, Oklahoma, Notre Dame fullback Joe Petrosanti rips through the Oklahoma line. Bob Williams passes to Monty Stickles to keep Oklahoma reeling.
The game really seesawed back and forth. Nobody ever really took control of it.
Petrosanti again cracks the line. Williams fumbles. Just over 3 minutes left. Oklahoma, unbeaten in 47 games, have scored in 123 straight. A deflected pass lands in the arms of Oklahoma's John Pello. The Sooners muster a pressure attack. This time, they called for a long pass into the end zone, intercepted by Bob Williams.
It was just an incredible defensive performance by both teams.
It's a scoreless game, time running out.
And the Irish offense just ground out that late fourth quarter touchdown.
The underdog Notre Dame team inspired. Dick Lynch takes a pitch out. Notre Dame scores.
Notre Dame has an incredible upset over Oklahoma.
Notre Dame hands the Sooners their first shutout in 124 consecutive games.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Fleming, along with Lee Groscott, welcoming you to the 66th battle between Michigan and Ohio State. Ohio State has already tied its own record of 17 consecutive Big Ten wins. A win today would make number 18 and also number 23 in a row.
There will never be a greater example of a coach versus coach matchup than in 1969.
Bo Schembechler, the head coach of Michigan, has an interesting story. He served under Woody Hayes as an assistant at Ohio State University.
Ohio State was an absolute juggernaut. They've got this long winning streak, unbeaten, untied. If they beat Michigan, they win another national championship. And here's Bo Schembechler, rookie coach of Michigan. If I'm doing this game, I don't see how Michigan wins it.
Handoff. Touchdown for Michigan. And the handoff goes to Billy Taylor, finds an opening, goes to the 25, rides off tacklers, goes to the 20-yard line, down the sideline to the 13 to the 10. He's out of bounds on the 7-yard line and maybe closer to the 5. Cross. Somersaults into the end zone. It's a touchdown for Michigan.
Bo knew exactly what Woody would do, what Woody would call. He had been with him for almost a decade, and he used that knowledge perfectly.
Masajowski passes it, intercepted by Michigan's Garden.
Michigan needed to win that game at that time, and Bo needed to beat Woody.
When you get into those environments, you better be at your best or you're going to get beat, and the Buckeyes got beat that day, which fed for the next years and, again, made that rivalry what it was going to be.
There it is, what has to be the upset of the century.
Talk about winning one high-profile game, Bo versus Woody in 1969, that set off an entire decade of Ohio State and Michigan and really took that rivalry from where it was, Ohio State dominating.
What I love about that game and that story is that you can still picture it today. I mean, if we were talking about this today, this very game, it would still make sense. Ohio State's defending national champs. And Jim Harbaugh's mad because Urban ran up the score the year before. So everybody's wearing 50 on the back of their jerseys and everybody has the score 50-14 posted up in the locker room. Upset
Same impact.
Same uniforms.
That's one of my favorite stories ever, though, from the year before, is they asked Woody why I went for 2 at the end of the game to make it 50. He said, because they wouldn't let me go for 3. Which is great. A lot of these upsets are memorable. They're moments within a season. But if you want to find a singular campaign that sort of defined the term upset and gave us one of the most improbable national champions as a result of all time, it would be 2007.
2007 was a crazy year. And you remember it started with App State at Michigan. And App State was a 1AA FCS.
Tom, do these guys have any chance going up to Ann Arbor and pulling out the upset? I don't think they do they, Tom?
They don't. It's a tall order going on the road in the Big House against a much anticipated Michigan offense.
This is a dead fish. This is a throwaway, right? There's no question Michigan was looking past them.
And now Edwards will find the end zone. Touchdown, Mountaineers!
Come down to the wire, and no one can believe Appalachian State is hanging around. Michigan is number 5 team in the country going into this game. I thought that was low.
Here we go. They're going to kick the field goal out of the hold of Mesco. Good snap, good hold. And the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
You could walk into that stadium a half an hour later and see college students going like this, staring off into Mars.
2007, the craziest college football season there maybe has ever been, and hasn't been another one since, where nobody could stay on top.
USC was favored by 40 points to beat Stanford Saturday night.
And with good reason. Stanford has lost 12 of its last 13 Pac-10 games, while the Trojans have won a Pac-10 record 35 straight at home.
Stanford USC, you wouldn't think of that as an upset game because Stanford and USC have been playing each other for 70 years.
Moody's pass picked off. Could be Golding goal for Yancey. Touchdown, Stanford.
That year, that game, under those circumstances, that line, which was 41, the future of the conference flipped on that game.
It was a hell of a game, and then you added the drama at the end of it.
4th and goal from the 10. Straight drop, goes to the fade to the other side. Bradford, touchdown, USC! Stanford, touchdown, Stanford, my goodness!
That game precipitated Pete Carroll leaving a dynasty at USC and leaving for the NFL. 2 years after that game, Stanford was USC.
Navy's been beat 43 times by the Irish. They're 4-4. They just had 59 points scored on them by Delaware, Division I AA. The Irish offense explodes against that lousy Navy defense.
Oh, I thought you good.
If you're at Navy and you lose 43 years in a row, you're thinking, why the heck do we still play this game?
In 76, there was a 6-point loss. In 84, Navy lost by 1. In 97, Navy's Pat McGrew was stopped like a foot short of the goal line.
So here's Hughes. Touchback, touchdown, Notre Dame.
I mean, Notre Dame's always bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We have to play perfect to beat them, and they just got to be off for a little bit.
Oh, sharply sacked.
So we find ourselves in overtime, and then in triple overtime.
Heidel Noah to pass for the end zone, man open, touchdown.
We score to go up 8 points.
Now it's Notre Dame's turn.
And they get down there, score.
Sharply to Thomas, turning and into the end zone.
And since it's the third overtime, they've got to go for 2.
Sharply pulls away, hands it to Travis Thomas, runs it right side. He'll be stopped, and so will a 43-game losing streak for Navy against Notre Dame. 4 decades plus of frustration and futility. All are forgotten.
This is Mountaineer Field in Morgantown, West Virginia, for the 100th edition of a bitter rivalry known as the Backyard Brawl.
The 07 season was so crazy all the way through the end that on the last night of the regular season, all West Virginia had to do to make the national championship game was beat a 4-7 Pitt team.
1st and 10 from the 45. White hit from behind. The ball is loose and the Panthers have it. Yep. Missed it. And McAfee wide left.
Their offense that had been rolling all season couldn't move the ball.
Lost the ball, Pitt has it. And this crowd has gone completely silent.
Pitt somehow beat West Virginia and ruined their season. It would have been really interesting to see what would have happened if we'd had to have West Virginia the national championship game.
The Pitt Panthers have pulled a stunning upset.
It was the craziest season. You could do a whole episode just on that season.
No one in a million years ever thought Pitt would win that game. I'll never forget being on the sideline, and Pat White and Steve Slayton were both kind of injured at different times in that game, and they just couldn't get it going. And as the game went on, the panic in their eyes will live with me forever.
I would argue it wasn't even the biggest upset that year because of Stanford beating USC.
Yeah.
And just to tell you, I mean, and when you think about that now, how can that be? Stanford was a 41-point underdog. They had been 1-11 the year before, and the university had discussed dropping down to 1AA. That's how bad it had gotten.
Did anybody at this day think that Appalachian State was going to go into Ann Arbor and thrash Michigan? And I mean, if you said so, tell me.
There was no relation for 90% of the guys in the Dallas Cowboy locker room at that time, and we lost it. We was like, no, Michigan just lost to App State. We might have had 1 or 2 players from the University of Michigan on our team. I mean, it felt like the biggest upset we had ever seen in our lifetime for the people that was in the locker room. We was like, Michigan just lost to some team from, I don't know where they from. They were black and
yellow. People love the David and Goliath stories. People tell me all the time, I love underdogs, I love upsets.
Upsets in college, I think, are worse than upsets in the NFL.
The emotional engagement that you have for something like that, it's irrational, it's crazy, it feels lovely.
The votes are in. Here are the 11 greatest upsets from the first 150 years of college football.
It's the first example that was a complete underdog upending the establishment.
Bosco looking. Campbell throws it. Touchdown!
He got reports of what's happening at Carnegie Tech, and he almost had a heart attack.
Boise State has won the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl.
Columbia 21, Army 20. It's all over. And there it is. What has to be the upset of the century.
Notre Dame hands the Sooners their first shutout in 124 consecutive games in the upset of the year, 7-0.
Thomas fighting, stopped. For the first time since 1963, Navy has beaten Notre Dame.
The Pitt Panthers have pulled a stunning upset.
The mighty Trojans of USC have fallen.
Appalachian State has stunned the college football world.
Let's just go back to Newt mailing it in. I don't think since we're your Buster legends.
The mighty Tartans were coached by a part-time judge.
And the judge's entire pregame speech was, and by the way, Newt Rockne did not show up. That's how little he thinks of you guys.
Imagine Nick Saban not showing up
we got this.
for the Northwestern State game.
What if Saban said, you guys have got this against Vanderbilt and Nashville. I'm going to send the backups up there, and I'm going to go watch LSU.
I'm going to leave Lane Kiffin in charge.